Imagine this. You wake up one morning, the sunlight streaming through your curtains, the world outside buzzing with life, but instead of feeling the warmth of possibility, you're greeted by a familiar heaviness in your chest. It's not sadness, exactly. It's something subtler, more insidious. It's the weight of 1,000 small disappointments, the echo of unspoken regrets, the quiet ache of a life that feels just slightly out of reach. You tell yourself it's just a bad day, but deep down you know it's more than that. This feeling has been with you for years, maybe even decades. It's not just a part of your life, it is your life. Now imagine this. What if this heaviness isn't a flaw in your existence, but a feature? What if, on some unconscious level, you're not just enduring this misery, you're choosing it? The idea seems absurd, even offensive. Why would anyone choose to suffer? Why would anyone cling to pain when joy is within reach? And yet, look around you. Look at the people in your life, the strangers on the street, the faces scrolling endlessly through social media. How many of them seem truly happy? How many of them are living lives of purpose and fulfillment? The truth is, most of us are not. Most of us are stuck in cycles of dissatisfaction, chasing after things we think will make us happy but never quite getting there. We blame the world, our circumstances, our pasts. But what if the real problem lies within us? This is the great paradox of human existence. We are creatures who crave happiness, yet we are inexplicably drawn to misery. We say we want freedom, but we build cages for ourselves. We say we want love, but we push it away. We say we want meaning, but we fill our lives with distractions. Why? Why do we sabotage our own happiness? Why do we cling to pain as if it were a lifeline? The answer lies in the shadows of the human psyche, in the places we're too afraid to look. It's not a simple answer, nor is it a comforting one. It requires us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about the nature of desire, about the illusions we built to protect ourselves from the raw, unfiltered truth of existence. It requires us to ask, what if misery isn't something that happens to us, but something we do to ourselves? Consider this. Every time you procrastinate, every time you stay in a relationship that drains you, every time you numb yourself with distractions, you are making a choice. You are choosing the familiar discomfort of misery over the terrifying uncertainty of change. You are choosing the safety of the known over the risk of the unknown. And in doing so, you are perpetuating your own suffering. But why? Why would anyone choose misery over joy? The answer lies in the complex interplay of psychology, philosophy, and societal conditioning. It lies in the way our brains are wired, the way our culture shapes our desires, the way our past traumas shape our present behaviors. It lies in the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. This is not an easy truth to face. It's far easier to blame the world, to believe that happiness is something external, something that can be achieved through the right job, the right relationship, the right amount of money. But what if happiness isn't something you can find? What if it's something you have to create? And what if the first step to creating it is to stop running from the very thing you're trying to escape? This is the journey we're about to embark on. A journey into the heart of human suffering, into the hidden forces that keep us trapped in cycles of misery, and into the radical possibility of breaking free. It's a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about yourself. But before we can begin, we must first confront the great question: why are we so addicted to misery? Why do we cling to pain as if it were a lifeline? And what would it take to let go? The answers are not simple, nor are they comforting, but they are necessary, because until we understand why we choose misery, we will never be free to choose something else. So let us begin. Let us dive into the shadows of the human psyche, into the places we're too afraid to look. Let us confront the uncomfortable truths, the hidden forces, the illusions we've built to protect ourselves from the raw, unfiltered truth of existence. Let us ask the hard questions, the ones that make us squirm, the ones that force us to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. Because only then can we begin to break free, only then can we begin to create a life that is not defined by misery, but by meaning, by purpose, by joy. This is not just a journey of self-discovery, it's a rebellion against the forces that keep us trapped, against the stories we've been told, against the illusions we've built. It's a rebellion against the very idea that misery is inevitable, that suffering is our default state. And it begins with a single radical question. What if you're not a victim of your circumstances, but a creator of them? What if the key to happiness lies not in changing the world, but in changing yourself? What if the first step to breaking free is to stop running from the very thing you're trying to escape? These are the questions we'll explore in the next section, as we delve into the hidden problem and its psychological and philosophical roots. But for now, sit with this thought. What if your misery is not a flaw in your existence, but a feature? What if, on some unconscious level, you're not just enduring it, you're choosing it? And what would it take to choose something else? To understand why we are so addicted to misery, we must first confront the uncomfortable truth that much of our suffering is self-inflicted. This is not to say that pain and hardship are not real, or that external circumstances do not play a role, but it is to say that our relationship with suffering is far more complex and far more self-destructive than we often realize. At the heart of this paradox lies a fundamental tension, the human desire for growth and the equally powerful fear of change. We are creatures of contradiction, torn between our longing for something better and our attachment to the familiar. And it is this tension that keeps us trapped in cycles of misery. But why? Why would we cling to pain when joy is within reach? Why would we sabotage our own happiness? The answer lies in the hidden forces that shape our behavior, forces rooted in psychology, philosophy, and the very structure of our brains. From a psychological perspective, one of the primary reasons we cling to misery is that it is familiar. The human brain is wired to seek out patterns, to create routines, to find comfort in the known. This is a survival mechanism, one that has served us well throughout evolution. But it also means that we are deeply resistant to change, even when that change is for the better. Think about it. How many times have you stayed in a job you hate, a relationship that drains you, or a lifestyle that leaves you feeling empty? How many times have you chosen the devil you know over the devil you don't? This is not a failure of character. It's a failure of imagination. We cling to misery because it is predictable, because it gives us a sense of control, however illusory. But there's more to it than that. Misery also serves a psychological function. It protects us from the unknown. When we are miserable, we know what to expect. We know how to navigate the terrain of our suffering, but when we step into the unknown, we are vulnerable, we are exposed, and that vulnerability is terrifying. As Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." This is the crux of the matter. We cling to misery because it allows us to avoid the deeper, more existential questions of life. It allows us to stay asleep, to remain in the comfort of our illusions, to avoid the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence. From a philosophical perspective, the roots of our addiction to misery lie in the nature of desire itself. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that human suffering is not an accident, but an inevitability. According to Schopenhauer, desire is the root of all suffering. We are constantly striving for something, happiness, success, love. But the moment we achieve it, we are left unsatisfied. We are trapped in an endless cycle of wanting and not having, of striving and never arriving. This is the paradox of desire. It is both the source of our motivation and the source of our misery. We are driven by our desires, yet they are never truly fulfilled, and so we suffer. But why do we continue to desire, even when we know it will lead to suffering? The answer lies in the nature of the human condition. We are beings who are acutely aware of our own mortality, of the fleeting nature of existence, and so we cling to our desires as a way of giving meaning to our lives. We tell ourselves that if we can just achieve this one thing, this job, this relationship, this goal, then we will be happy. But of course, we never are. This is the trap of desire. It promises us happiness, but it delivers only more suffering. And yet, we cannot let go. We cannot stop wanting. But our addiction to misery is not just a product of our psychology or our philosophy. It is also a product of our society. We live in a culture that glorifies suffering, that equates struggle with virtue, that tells us we must earn our happiness through hard work and sacrifice. Think about the stories we tell ourselves. The hero must endure great trials before achieving victory. The artist must suffer for their craft. The entrepreneur must sacrifice everything for success. These narratives are deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness, and they shape the way we view our own lives. But there's a darker side to this cultural conditioning. We are also taught to fear happiness, to view it as something fleeting, something undeserved. We are told that if we are too happy, something bad will happen, that we must always be striving, always be improving, always be working towards something better. This is the great irony of modern life. We are surrounded by more opportunities for happiness than ever before, yet we are more miserable than ever. We have more wealth, more technology, more freedom, yet we are more anxious, more depressed, more disconnected. Why? Because we have been conditioned to believe that happiness is something external, something that can be achieved through the right job, the right relationship, the right amount of money. But of course it never is. The neurological trap. On a neurological level, our addiction to misery is reinforced by the very structure of our brains. The brain is wired to seek out pleasure and avoid pain, but it is also wired to adapt to our circumstances. This is known as the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much pleasure we experience, we quickly return to a baseline level of happiness. But the same is true of pain. No matter how much we suffer, we adapt. We become accustomed to our misery, to the point where it feels normal, and so we stay stuck, trapped in cycles of suffering, unable to break free. This is the neurological trap. Our brains are wired to keep us in a state of equilibrium, to resist change, to maintain the status quo, and so we cling to our misery, not because we want to, but because it is what we know. But perhaps the deepest root of our addiction to misery lies in the existential dilemma of human existence. We are beings who are acutely aware of our own mortality, of the fleeting nature of life, of the inevitability of death. And this awareness creates a profound sense of anxiety, a fear of the unknown, a longing for meaning. As the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Man is condemned to be free." This is the paradox of human existence. We long for freedom, yet we are terrified of it. We long for meaning, yet we are overwhelmed by the responsibility of creating it. And so we cling to our misery as a way of avoiding this existential dilemma. We tell ourselves that if we can just endure this suffering, if we can just get through this hardship, then we will find meaning. But of course, we never do. This is the ultimate trap. We cling to our misery because it gives us a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. We define ourselves by our suffering, by our struggles, by our pain, and in doing so, we perpetuate our own misery. But if our addiction to misery is rooted in our psychology, our philosophy, our society, and our neurology, how can we ever hope to break free? The answer lies in understanding these forces, in confronting the uncomfortable truths about ourselves, in challenging the stories we've been told and the illusions we built. It lies in recognizing that our misery is not inevitable, that it is not a flaw in our existence, but a feature, one that we have the power to change. But this is not an easy path. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront the shadows of our own psyche. It requires us to ask the hard questions, to face the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence, to step into the unknown. And it begins with a single, radical realization that we are not victims of our circumstances, but creators of them. That our misery is not something that happens to us, but something we do to ourselves. This is the first step to breaking free. But the journey is far from over. In the next section, we will explore the unseen consequences of our addiction to misery, how it silently shapes our personal and societal realities, how it keeps us trapped in cycles of suffering, and how it prevents us from living lives of meaning and purpose. For now, sit with this thought. What if your misery is not a flaw in your existence, but a feature? What if, on some unconscious level, you're not just enduring it, you're choosing it? And what would it take to choose something else? If our addiction to misery is rooted in the hidden forces of psychology, philosophy, and societal conditioning, then its consequences are equally insidious, shaping not only our individual lives, but the very fabric of our society. These consequences are often invisible, operating beneath the surface of our awareness, yet they exert a profound influence on how we think, feel, and behave. To understand the full scope of this problem, we must examine how our attachment to suffering silently shapes our personal and collective realities. We must confront the ways in which it distorts our perception, limits our potential, and perpetuates cycles of dysfunction. And we must ask, what is the cost of clinging to misery? What are we sacrificing in the process? One of the most immediate consequences of our addiction to misery is the way it distorts our perception of reality. When we are trapped in cycles of suffering, our worldview becomes narrow, filtered through the lens of pain. We begin to see the world as a hostile place, full of threats and obstacles. We become hyper-focused on what is wrong, what is missing, what is lacking. This is not just a psychological phenomenon, it is a neurological one. The brain has a tendency to prioritize negative experiences over positive ones, a bias known as the negativity bias. This bias evolved as a survival mechanism, helping our ancestors avoid danger and stay alive. But in the modern world, it often works against us, amplifying our suffering and blinding us to the possibilities for joy and growth. As a result, we become trapped in a self-reinforcing cycle. We focus on our misery, which reinforces our negative perception of reality, which, in turn, deepens our misery. It's a feedback loop that keeps us stuck, unable to see the opportunities for change that are right in front of us. Another consequence of our addiction to misery is the erosion of our potential. When we are consumed by suffering, we are less able to take risks, to pursue our dreams, to step into the unknown. We become risk-averse, clinging to the safety of the familiar, even when it no longer serves us. This is not just a personal loss, it is a collective one. Think of all the untapped potential in the world, all the creativity, innovation, and brilliance that is stifled by fear and self-doubt. Think of all the people who could be making a difference, who could be living lives of purpose and fulfillment, but who are instead trapped in cycles of misery. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die." This is the danger of clinging to misery. It prevents us from shedding our old selves, from growing, from becoming who we are meant to be. It keeps us small, confined, and stagnant. On a societal level, our addiction to misery perpetuates cycles of dysfunction and inequality. When individuals are trapped in cycles of suffering, they are less able to contribute to their communities, to build meaningful relationships, to create positive change. This creates a ripple effect, spreading pain and dysfunction throughout society. Consider the ways in which our cultural narratives glorify suffering and struggle. We celebrate the self-made individual who overcomes great adversity, but we rarely question the systems that create that adversity in the first place. We tell ourselves that suffering is noble, that it builds character, that it is necessary for success. But in doing so, we normalize and even valorize pain, making it harder for individuals to break free from cycles of misery. This is particularly evident in the way we approach mental health. Despite growing awareness of issues like anxiety and depression, there is still a pervasive stigma around seeking help. We are told to tough it out, to push through, to suck it up. But this only deepens the cycle of suffering, preventing individuals from getting the support they need to heal and grow. Perhaps the most profound consequence of our addiction to misery is the loss of meaning. When we are consumed by suffering, we lose sight of what truly matters. We become disconnected from our values, our passions, our sense of purpose. We fill our lives with distractions, work, entertainment, social media. But these distractions only deepen our sense of emptiness. This is the great irony of modern life. We have more opportunities for happiness than ever before, yet we are more disconnected from meaning than ever. We chase after external rewards, money, status, success, but these rewards are fleeting, leaving us feeling hollow and unfulfilled. As the existentialist philosopher Viktor Frankl once wrote, "Man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life. But when we are trapped in cycles of misery, we lose sight of this search. We become so focused on our pain that we forget to ask the deeper questions. What is my purpose? What do I value? What kind of life do I want to live?" The consequences of our addiction to misery are not just personal. They are societal, cultural, and existential. They shape the way we live, the way we relate to one another, the way we understand ourselves and the world. And they demand a radical shift in perspective, a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our society. But this shift is not easy. It requires us to challenge the stories we've been told, to question the systems that perpetuate suffering, to step into the unknown. It requires us to ask, what would it take to break free from these cycles? What would it take to create a life and a world defined not by misery, but by meaning, purpose, and joy? The answer lies in the next section, where we will explore the rebellion against these forces, the radical shift in perspective that allows us to break free from the trap of misery and reclaim our lives. For now, sit with this thought. What are the unseen consequences of your addiction to misery? How has it shaped your perception, limited your potential, and disconnected you from meaning? And what would it take to break free? The realization that we are addicted to misery is both unsettling and liberating. It is unsettling because it forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that much of our suffering is self-inflicted. But it is liberating because it means we have the power to change. If misery is a choice, then so is joy. If we can create our own suffering, then we can also create our own freedom. But how? How do we break free from the cycles of misery that have defined our lives? How do we step into the unknown, confront our fears, and reclaim our potential? The answer lies in rebellion, a radical shift in perspective that challenges everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the world. It is a rebellion against the forces that keep us trapped, against the stories we've been told, against the illusions we've built. It is a rebellion against the very idea that misery is inevitable, that suffering is our default state. This rebellion begins with a single radical realization, that we are not victims of our circumstances, but creators of them. That our misery is not something that happens to us, but something we do to ourselves. And from this realization, a new path emerges, a path defined by courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront the shadows of our own psyche. The first step in breaking free from misery is awareness. We must become conscious of the patterns, habits, and beliefs that keep us trapped. We must shine a light on the shadows of our psyche, confronting the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. This is not an easy process. It requires us to be brutally honest with ourselves, to ask the hard questions, to face the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence. But it is also the most important step, because without awareness, there can be no change. As Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the power of awareness. It allows us to take control of our lives, to break free from the cycles of suffering that have defined us, and to create a new story for ourselves. The second step in breaking free from misery is acceptance. We must accept that suffering is a part of life, that pain is inevitable, that we cannot control everything. But we must also accept that we have the power to choose how we respond to that suffering. This is not about resignation or passivity. It is about recognizing that we cannot change the past, but we can change how we relate to it. We cannot control the external world, but we can control our internal world. We cannot avoid pain, but we can choose not to cling to it. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This is the essence of acceptance. It is not about giving up, but about letting go. It is about releasing our attachment to suffering and embracing the possibility of something new. The third step in breaking free from misery is action. We must take concrete steps to change our lives, to break free from the cycles of suffering, and to create a new reality for ourselves. This is where the rebellion truly begins. It is not enough to be aware of our patterns or to accept our circumstances. We must also take action. We must make the difficult choices, face our fears, and step into the unknown. This might mean leaving a toxic relationship, quitting a dead-end job, or confronting a long-buried trauma. It might mean setting boundaries, saying no, or prioritizing our own needs. It might mean taking risks, pursuing our passions, or embracing vulnerability. Whatever form it takes, action is the bridge between awareness and transformation. It is the moment when we stop being passive participants in our own lives and start being active creators of our own destiny. The fourth step in breaking free from misery is alignment. We must align our actions with our values, our passions, and our sense of purpose. We must create a life that is not defined by external rewards, but by internal fulfillment. This is not about achieving some arbitrary standard of success or happiness. It is about living in accordance with our deepest truths, about creating a life that feels authentic and meaningful. As the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." This is the power of alignment. It allows us to create a life that is not defined by misery, but by meaning, purpose, and joy. The fifth and final step in breaking free from misery is resilience. We must cultivate the strength and flexibility to navigate the challenges of life, to bounce back from setbacks, and to keep moving forward. This is not about avoiding pain or hardship, but about developing the capacity to endure it. It is about building a foundation of self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-trust that allows us to face whatever life throws at us. As the psychologist Viktor Frankl once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." This is the essence of resilience. It is not about avoiding suffering, but about transforming it. It is about finding meaning in the midst of pain and using that meaning to fuel our growth. Breaking free from misery is not a one-time event, but a lifelong journey. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront the shadows of our own psyche. It requires us to challenge the stories we've been told, to question the systems that perpetuate suffering, and to step into the unknown. But it is also a journey of profound transformation. It is a journey that allows us to reclaim our lives, to reconnect with our values, and to create a new reality for ourselves. It is a journey that leads not to the absence of suffering, but to the presence of meaning, purpose, and joy. And it begins with a single radical realization that we are not victims of our circumstances, but creators of them. That our misery is not something that happens to us, but something we do to ourselves. And that we have the power to choose something else. In the final section, we will explore the ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization that redefines how we see reality and offers a paradigm shift so profound it makes past struggles suddenly clear. For now, sit with this thought. What would it take to break free from your addiction to misery? What would it take to create a life defined not by suffering, but by meaning, purpose, and joy? The journey to break free from the addiction to misery is not just about changing our circumstances or adopting new habits. It is about a fundamental shift in how we see ourselves and the world. It is about uncovering the ultimate truth, a truth so profound that it redefines our understanding of reality and offers a path to lasting freedom. This truth is not something that can be handed to you. It is not a quick fix or a simple answer. It is something you must discover for yourself through introspection, struggle, and transformation. But when you do, it will change everything. The ultimate truth is this: misery is not a flaw in your existence. It is a teacher. At first glance, this idea seems contradictory. How can suffering be a teacher? How can pain lead to growth? And yet, throughout history, the greatest minds have recognized the transformative power of suffering. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." This is not a call to glorify suffering, but to recognize its potential for growth. Suffering forces us to confront our limitations, to question our assumptions, and to dig deeper into ourselves than we ever thought possible. Similarly, Carl Jung believed that the shadow, the dark, hidden parts of our psyche, holds the key to our transformation. By confronting our shadow, by embracing the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore, we can integrate our pain and emerge stronger, wiser, and more whole. This is the paradox of suffering. It is both a burden and a gift. It is a burden because it hurts, because it challenges us, because it forces us to confront the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence. But it is also a gift, because it has the power to transform us, to awaken us, to lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world. The process of transforming suffering into growth is not easy. It requires us to sit with our pain, to feel it fully, and to resist the urge to numb or escape it. It requires us to ask the hard questions. What is this pain trying to teach me? What is it revealing about myself? What is it asking me to change? This is the alchemy of pain, the process of turning lead into gold, of transforming suffering into wisdom. It is not about denying or avoiding pain, but about embracing it as a catalyst for growth. Consider the story of the phoenix, the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes. The phoenix does not avoid the fire. It embraces it. It allows itself to be consumed, knowing that from the ashes, it will be reborn. This is the essence of the alchemy of pain. It is about allowing ourselves to be transformed by our suffering, to emerge from the fire, stronger, wiser, and more alive. Another aspect of the ultimate truth is the realization that our suffering is not separate from the world around us. We are not isolated individuals struggling alone against the forces of misery. We are interconnected beings, part of a larger whole, and our suffering is deeply tied to the suffering of others. This realization can be both humbling and empowering. It is humbling because it forces us to recognize that we are not the center of the universe, that our pain is not unique or special. But it is also empowering because it reminds us that we are not alone, that we are part of something greater than ourselves, and that our growth can contribute to the growth of others. As the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "Compassion is the basis of morality." This is the power of recognizing our interconnectedness. It allows us to move beyond our own suffering and connect with the suffering of others. It allows us to find meaning in our pain by using it to create a better world. The final aspect of the ultimate truth is the realization that freedom lies not in the absence of suffering, but in the acceptance of it. We cannot control the external world, but we can control how we relate to it. We cannot avoid pain, but we can choose not to cling to it. This is the freedom of acceptance. It is about letting go of the illusion of control, of the need to fix or change everything, and embracing the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence. It is about finding peace, not in the absence of suffering, but in the presence of meaning. As the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." This is the essence of the ultimate truth. It is not about escaping suffering, but about transforming it. It is about finding meaning in the midst of pain and using that meaning to fuel our growth. The ultimate truth is not an endpoint, but a beginning. It is not a destination, but a journey. It is a call to action, a challenge to confront the shadows of our own psyche, and a reminder that we have the power to create a new reality for ourselves. This journey is not easy. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to face the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence. But it is also a journey of profound transformation, one that allows us to reclaim our lives, to reconnect with our values, and to create a new reality for ourselves. And it begins with a single radical realization: that misery is not a flaw in your existence, it is a teacher. As we come to the end of this exploration, I leave you with one final question. What is your misery trying to teach you? What is it revealing about yourself? What is it asking you to change? And what would it take to embrace it as a catalyst for growth?